Okay, we're live. Okay. Okay, well, Mayor Johnston is joining us. We're back from our closed session at 6:30. No reportable action. City Attorney, anything to add?
Nope. The council met in closed session to consider labor negotiations for all underrepresented employees, and no reportable action was taken. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Mayor Johnston's back, so I'll let him take over. Although
Unmute.
Oh, you're on mute.
There you are.
Now you're fine.
Am I good? Okay. I'm on my phone because the computer that was delivered says I'm not connected.
Oh boy.
So we won't try and let's don't take anybody else's time. I'll work from my phone
Okay.
and hope that it's not too distracting. Okay, are we back in session? I thought I heard the city attorney saying there's nothing to report out. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the regular session of the city council hasn't been called to order. I'm doing so now. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Johnston,
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz,
Here.
Councilmember Francina,
Here.
Councilmember Haney,
Here.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. James, will you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, and I have a flag here behind me. Ready, begin. I pledge
Pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to the flag of the United States,
United States of America and to the republic
Republic for which it stands.
stands.
nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Justice for all.
Okay, we have a little vocal delay there. But
Yeah, there's a delay.
thanks, James.
Thanks.
Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes in the agenda?
Mayor Johnston, I'd like to pull items D and F from the consent calendar for short questions.
E and F, did you say?
D is a dog in F.
D and F, okay. We'll do that. Are there any other changes? Okay.
Only corrections I asked for, so nothing else.
Okay, so the agenda is then approved as presented, with the exception we're going to pull items D and F off of the consent and have that for some discussion. Okay. Shall we have a motion on the balance of the consent calendar?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any objection? If not, so ordered. Okay, Bill, you had some questions on what number or letter D?
D, yeah, which is the citizens option for public safety funding.
Right.
And I'm going to make one notation, one observation, then I'm going to relate a personal concern. There's a school resource officer in there, and we don't even know if school's going to be in session this fall. And I note that that's another agency. My computer just fell down. That's another agency, and this is something that we can use. My understanding is for focused issues, and I want to indulge everyone with just a 1-minute story of what I personally observed that really has concerned me, and that has to do with motorcycles. I was turned on to Ojai Avenue with a red light where people were stopped at Ojai. I looked at my rearview mirror, saw 2 motorcycles going into the middle over the double passing down the middle, gunning their engines. As soon as it turned, they dragged out, peeling rubber. Right when a person started, an elderly person punched the signal to start the pedestrian crossing, flashing at Westridge. I was very worried. I had a nightmare all of a sudden about thinking, oh my God, I can't get close to this person because these motorcycles aren't going to see them and they're going to go right by me. So I stopped well short of the crossing. They didn't care. They skidded to a stop in the back of me, looked on both sides, then gunned it again and passed this pedestrian on both sides. Then did wheelies in front of the bob shop. And I just wonder, I've seen a lot of speeding. I've seen a lot of issues with our motorcycles, and this was the worst example. And I wonder if we, compared to a school resource officer, we need to look at maybe some focused mitigation with respect to maybe getting a reputation of a town that strictly enforces traffic laws for motorcycles.
That's a good
Decoys and
point.
things like that.
Is there a time element, James, on approving the cops?
No, I don't believe there's a time limit, and I have the chief here, but I'm thinking he and I can have that conversation and bring it back next meeting.
Okay.
That was really,
Yeah, we'll do that.
I mean,
Is
I
there any-
could not believe they saw this lady in the crosswalk and then gunned their motorcycles on both sides of her in the middle of the crosswalk. I couldn't believe it.
Okay, if there's no objection, then we're going to postpone this to give the chief and the city manager an opportunity to get some answers for us on Bill's suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, F. Oh, yes,
Councilmember
Randy?
I just had one quick thing. I was just reading it on here. What the funding source is for. And maybe we look at it as how much money would this fund regarding having some type of motorcycle enforcement for ticketing in our community? Because police officers in cars are not inclined to pull over people or to write tickets. They are, but they aren't. A motorcycle officer's job is to write tickets. So maybe we look at that $100,000 and maybe ask Ventura County how much, is there an opportunity to get some type of motorcycle enforcement with that money this year?
Okay, the city manager has his direction.
Mayor, can I add something?
Yes.
I strongly support what Bill and Randy brought up, because every time I cross Fairview or I'm in that area, our town seems to be a destination for motorcycles. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking groups of at least 20, just a row going into the mountains, coming back down, running through town. I would like our town to have a reputation for enforcing traffic violations and gunning and the noise and the whole, whatever we can legally do, I'm all for it. And
Okay.
we hear those complaints. It's right up there with dog barking, people complaining, what can we do about motorcycles gunning through town? Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Item number F. Bill.
Just a real quick comment. Would it be possible, and what would be the proper mechanism to get more information about the Community Energy Corporation, a little bit more detail about what renewables they're using and contracting for, how they're generating renewables, the proportions over different kinds of renewables? Is there a way of getting more information about that?
Yes, there is, and we had a request in, and they were prepared to come up until we had the shutdown, and now we're meeting, over the air. So I just told James and the Clean Energy, is that what it is? Clean
Power.
the CPPA group to hold on that, and we'd get back with them.
Okay.
But would we want to have a presentation using this format, or should we hold a good thought and think that we're going to actually be able to be back in the council chambers at some point in the near future?
I'm a patient man.
Well,
Okay,
Mayor,
good. I'll hold you to that, Bill. Okay,
Mayor-
yeah, we'll plan that. Yes, Randy?
also, see, I was talking to Bill about this. I remember you and I having this conversation in council chambers a couple months ago. So
Yeah.
again, whenever it's the right time to do it. That's all.
Okay, well, they're ready to do it and to help on rates. In the meantime, I've been trying to understand the rates myself personally here at home. And, our friends in the utility business have got their problems, and they're not necessarily, it's sort of like, well, why do I need to spend a whole lot of time with you talking about the other guy? Why don't you go talk to, in this case, the Clean Power Alliance? And so we've been talking with them today. And I would like to get it to a point where if we did a public presentation, we wouldn't take an hour and be more confused when we were done. One of the difficulties is that the Edison company is trying to adapt to all of this, and their rate changes, I don't know if you're aware of it, but they've been just jumping all over the place, trying to adapt to the new reality. Then the Clean Power Alliance was trying to stay with them in order to give everybody an easy comparison, but it appears that that's not a successful strategy, so we're going to have to change that. So I'll get in touch with them again. I haven't forgotten about it, and we'll get somebody to come talk to us.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and move up receive and file.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is that for both D and F?
Yes.
Oh no, we're continuing.
We're continuing D.
Yeah, we're continuing D. You're right. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any objection? If not, so ordered. Okay, we are workshop on the operating budget number 2. And James, let's see, what time are we? We got another 14 minutes before it's public comment time.
Mhm.
Do you want to take the public comments that would have been submitted now, and then we'll just take a brief break at 7:30 to see if there are any additional ones coming in?
Well, so we've asked that, like most other cities, we put the cutoff at 5 p.m. So we have 2 comments, and we wouldn't receive any additional because the cutoff was at 5 p.m.
Okay, well, in that case, is there any objection for the city manager or the city clerk, whoever has the public comments, to read them into the record?
No objection.
Are you going to do that now? Is that what you're asking?
I was going to say doing it so we don't start the budget thing and then stop and start again.
Perfect.
So someone's going to read the public comments out loud? Is that what's happening?
Well, one was requesting to do that, and it was
Yes.
short. It was from Mr. McCrae over the pickle court, and I don't know, what was the second one?
The second one actually is about the budget, so we can include that then. It's from the museum, Ojai Valley Museum.
Oh, okay. So then that's fine. So do you want to just read Mr. McCrae's letter? It's short.
Sure. So this is the public comment from Mr. McCrae. The Ojai residents that live on and near South Ventura Street would like to know what has been done to mitigate the horrific pop, pop, pop noise that the pickleball players are imposing on residents. We realize their playtime has been cut down to 4 hours per day due to the coronavirus, but the popping noise still makes relaxing and staying in our homes impossible. Do you think it's okay to allow a few Ojai and non-Ojai residents to play a non-essential game in our neighborhood that creates an environment that makes it impossible for the neighbors to enjoy peace and quiet in their own homes? These people are having their fun and games at the expense of neighbors who are suffering from their noise and disrespect.
Okay. Let's go to the operating budget workshop. James.
Thank you. So give me 1 second. We have a brief PowerPoint here that I'm pulling up. We talked last meeting about cash flow, the immediate concern, but we also mentioned at that time that way back in March, we presented a proposed budget to the budget committee, and we had started to bring it to council. And with the coronavirus, everything is impacted. So we've gone back to the budget committee, reviewed that budget, and we are presenting it today to the council. I'm going to start trying to kind of talk high level. The packet has, line item budget detail, but we're talking about just kind of the high level of where we're at this point. Today, at this moment, what we're doing is the budget that's included in the packet is the cost of providing this year's service level at next year's cost with next year's revenues. And that's what you have there. And so to get it out of the way, we project if we were to do all the same things we did this year and not make any adjustments, we would have a net loss of $946,000. And we're not proposing that we adopt that budget, but we wanted to bring that back as the starting point to show, if we weren't changing anything, we'd have a deficit of $946,000. So today, what we want to do is go through that, review the potential reductions that can be made to balance the budget, and get feedback from the city council. We've identified reductions that we could make to try to balance the budget. And so we'd get feedback and then come back at a future meeting with the revised budget. And then quickly, one note is Next council meeting, we're expecting to go through the CIP and for the first time ever, the Measure C budget. We're creating a separate fund for the Measure C revenues, which have been slow to get started because of the circumstances, but are going to make a major impact next year. With that, the March 13th budget I mentioned a couple minutes ago was it. It was we were projecting $11.5 million in revenues, almost $12 million in total expenditures, with a deficit of $345,000. And we had presented this and walked through it at that time. Now, 2 months later, the effects of the coronavirus, we're looking at this revised proposed budget, which shows, let me kind of go back and forth here, revenues dropping from 11.5 million to 10.37 million. And we have reduced all the, we had identified some additional services in the March 13th budget. We've taken those back and pulled it back to the current service level cost. So as it stands right now, we're projecting a $946,000 deficit. We met with the budget committee on April 24th and walked through these line items closely. And I think, there are a lot of good questions. One of the big questions I remember that the budget committee had was they felt that they were surprised by the property tax being projected to be a drop, because that caught everybody off guard. But the explanation for that is that it appears likely there's going to be deferrals and non-payments of property tax this year. And so that's why we had reduced that. And so we had walked through kind of at that level of detail with the budget committee on the April 24th meeting. They ultimately, agreed to move forward with this budget as proposed at this time. So this budget with the $946,000 deficit, what's changed from the original budget that we had projected with the $300,000 deficit is we revised it with a $1.2 million revenue drop, and we reduced expenses by removing promotional opportunities, new positions that we had recommended for service enhancements. We've moved some CIP projects out of the and we eliminated and reduced some non-essential contracts. We also originally had proposed increasing our contingency to the highest level it's ever been. We've taken that back down because it's not feasible this year under the circumstances. So the contingency we propose in this year's budget is $200,000, which is the same that it was last year. And then just high level, we're showing the revenues. Although sales tax, property tax, and TOT are all expected to be impacted by the coronavirus, they're still the big three. There are main sources of revenue. Obviously, those three are going to depend on things starting to reopen, which we started to see over the last couple of days. And then to help lead kind of the discussion and explain what we're looking at in possible reductions to try to get back to balanced with our current $945,000 deficit. The budget committee asked us to prepare a chart showing the cost of mandatory services or items and the cost of discretionary items. And so that's what this table before you is. You'll notice mandatory items are the services we provide to residents: police services, public works, community development services, recreation, the administrative staff, and utilities. You'll notice those total about $9.4 million. And so the point I think that the budget committee and I were making with that is, those are the things that we really have to provide, the services we have to provide. And so we wanted to show the cost of just doing those. Now, if the quote unquote discretionary items, I don't even like using that term, because some of these things are things that I don't really think are discretionary, but they're in a year where we're having significant budget challenges. They're the things we don't have to do, So I guess in that way they're discretionary. But So the four that are large numbers are the community organization funding, which is approximately $230,000 a year. Our $100,000 early payment of retiree medical, which we don't have to do, but it's a good practice to do. It's the 20% transfer to TOT, which is about $600,000. And then we also, on top of that, transfer about $115,000 to our equipment replacement fund. And again, don't like to call those discretionary, but there's a couple of factors. One, with Measure C being adopted, in a bad year, we could defer that 20% transfer because it's not the only source of CIP projects now. And for the equipment fund transfer, we actually have built up a pretty good reserve there. We have a couple $100,000 for equipment replacement. So we could take a year where it's a bad year and not make that transfer and save some money on the general fund. So you'll notice on the list of discretionary items, approximately $1 million, which, as I mentioned, we projected a $945,000 deficit. So we could balance the budget by making some reductions to discretionary items. So what we did here is we, without just cutting all of those things, making reductions to those things, plus the hiring freeze of staff, we were able to identify $970,000 in potential cuts, which would get the balance or the budget balanced. But they are, there's some difficult decisions in these reductions. So I kind of went through some of them right now, but what this shows is the amount that they would be reduced for this year. So like the TOT transfer, looking back at the last slide, is $630,000. If we reduced $510,000 from that could be, part of the savings to get balanced. And it would hopefully be offset by Measure C, which are the challenges. When do the hotels get back into business? But so we have recommended budget reductions that we could do to get balanced. And, I guess with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but essentially, again, what our goal today was to bring the cost of this year's service levels at next year's costs with next year's revenues, which would be almost $1 million shortfall. So we'd either need to reduce some services or identify some savings here. So we've identified some savings as you see before.
Okay, James, I understand your discomfort with calling the discretionary list discretionary because it's a mixture. It's not. They're the only item on there that's identified that is really discretionary is the community organization funding. And I assume some number out of that 631,000 that would be for capital projects that we don't have to do, that would be nice to do, as opposed to the monies that are in there for roads, which we do have to take care of. Those are not going away. We're not building new roads. We're repairing the ones we have. So we need to kind of, as with time permits, we need to refine some of that to see how much we're just deferring, because that then in effect is we're calling it what I would call a structurally unbalanced budget that is legally permitted. We could adopt it to deal with the cash flow problems we're going to experience from the shutdown. But if we end up with lost revenues and we the next year or mid-year don't address some of these things, we've just buried them for a while and carried them forward, which means that our reserve is not truly a discretionary reserve anymore. It's just undesignated.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just had a question.
Bill.
Okay. James, a couple of questions. One comment. I just want to go on record. I think deferring the OPEB payment for the time being is a no-brainer. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
When we do our sales tax audit, does that cover, well, in the past, the sales, is there any way of tracking the sales tax we're supposed to be getting from deliveries to the city limits by, the Amazon and that kind of thing in the world?
Yeah, so the report we get actually does show those. It shows the revenues received under I think they call it the Wayfair Act, or the Wayfair decision. So we actually do get a report on that.
Okay, so there may be a small offset there, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I think too. Yeah.
And do we have any way of tracking whether or not under the CARES Act the county is getting any federal assistance to help with the sheriff's budget that ought to be shared with all the contract cities if in fact they do get that assistance?
Yeah, we know that the county received funding. We don't have a breakdown of what their funding's for. We could see if we could find something. I can't think of a way offhand that
Maybe it's impossible, but it just seems to be only fair that if they're allocating some to help the sheriff's budget, that they share the relief with the contract city.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Bill, how about we refer or have James put that on our budget and finance subcommittee meeting, because there are a lot of things in that regard between now and say June 15th that we might want to discuss as to what our options are.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes, Susan.
James?
Yeah.
Will you explain the point you just made about revenue from Amazon? What are you talking about?
Yeah, so the city now, for a couple years, cities did not receive sales tax for purchases made through, large online companies like Amazon, Wayfair, et cetera. And there's been a change recently where we do receive sales tax now for those. So somehow I missed that. That's important.
Yeah, Susan, the sales tax laws in California were based upon what they call citus for cash registers in the old days, where everything was sold through a retailer. Mm-hmm. And so where the cash register was, that jurisdiction received the sales tax. But with e-commerce, that became a huge loss, not only to some of the local businesses, but to the jurisdictions. And then there were all sorts of legal issues over that, and they've tried to revise it. But that court decision was a good step in the right direction. What it in effect says is that we will have a virtual cash register in our town for stuff that gets delivered by companies like Amazon.
Yep.
Okay, so they track it because through the address, obviously. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, James.
So that was, essentially, I guess what we're looking for is feedback on, we've identified some discretionary items. To your point, I agree. The transfer to TOT, I wouldn't necessarily call discretionary, but I think the reason we've identified it is that one of the points of doing what we did with Measure C and everything was to be able to not defer maintenance and continue to make progress even in challenging years. And I think this year, nobody expected the challenging year to come upon us so quick, but this year will be a challenging year. So that, it's not our first recommended option, but it's one that we identified as a
Well, it seemed that if we're keeping in good faith on the Measure C, that the monies that were being directed to the capital improvement or repair fund for roads, which was really it was only a small part of the 600 and some thousand, I think it's like 100,000. Yeah. I would think that we would still want to not supplant that with Measure C money, but supplement it with Measure C money. In other words, if we spend the 100,000 plus whatever came in of new money on roads, so we are in no way slacking off on that. And I don't believe we've had any money in that account for fire protection. So it really goes to things like parks and repairs. I agree with Bill when he says that the pre-funding of the OPEB is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer if we're doing it for purposes of improving our cash flow and to get us through this tough time. It's just a question of how long that tough time lasts, because I think we had a report, I don't recall the number, but there's still a sizable amount of money going out the door paying for people who are in retirement, who have benefits we don't offer anybody else, and they're expensive, but they're vested. So it is an obligation that we need to kind of keep under control. Otherwise, it'll start eating up the budget in the future years.
Exactly.
So,
Mayor, I have a
yeah, Randy.
on the reduction of the community funding levels. I agree that we need to look at those, and I have no problem going back to 2019 levels. I would still like the council to be able to discuss each one of them.
Oh, yeah.
And reconfigure who's going to get what out of that remaining balance,
Sure.
versus just giving everyone 2019 numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was what we intended. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear, because that's a good point. So what we were planning to do is between now and I think it's the June 9th meeting, that if take your feedback, make these reductions and come back, and in particular the community funding, we'd come back with just that amount available for the council to decide who it goes to.
And then, Mayor, I had one more question. Again, I didn't see, James, did you include anywhere in here any reductions in employee salaries? Or is that, we're still funding at 2020 salary levels?
So we have it here, the hiring freeze that we currently have in place. And we are, the challenge for us was we didn't budget, the reduction in part-time, the reduction in contract, the reduction in staff costs, because it wasn't clear how long the shutdown would last. And so we're trying to budget with the hiring freeze. We know we're going to hold off on hiring any new positions, but we're trying to budget assuming we're going to have the same amount of full-time staff people next year. That's something we could cut, but we didn't want to start by budgeting a cut to those positions.
Okay, thank you.
But it is the hiring freeze, and it's three and a half positions that are currently unfilled out of our 28.
Okay, is there anything else on this topic before we move along?
Nice job.
Mayor, don't forget about the museum, the public comment.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Thank you, Susan.
And what the museum submitted a budget request. I don't know if I would call it a public comment. So it's a couple pages with the budget request. Do we want to read that out loud, or do we want to? We could.
No, you can just record that was it submitted to be commented on?
No, I believe, and I talked to Brian Akins today, and I believe it was just submitted as a budget request for us to consider. I told them that today we'd talk about setting the amount of community funding, but at the next, the June 9th meeting is when we talk about who actually gets what portions of that. So
Perfect.
But I noted it's the same amount as last year, I believe.
that's what we, so
That's the starting point.
yeah, this is the starting point with the $1 million deficit. So we would.
The request, I'm just saying the request.
Oh, yes, good point. So that's the budget request is the same amount as last year in recognition of
Okay, so the clerk will just make a note in the minutes that we did receive the request, and it's been forwarded to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anything else? If not, let's move to number 3, the coronavirus report.
All right. I feel like I'm PowerPointing you to death today, but I got one more.
It actually works better when you're sitting at home where you can actually read it.
That's
I
what
think
I'm
someone.
taking advantage of the opportunity. So give me one.
I think I can enlarge it.
So we wanted to give the last couple of coronavirus updates. We've kind of just said the latest things happening in Ojai. We wanted to kind of give more of an update on countywide at this point. And I'll keep it brief, but the statistics as of yesterday in Ventura County, we had 678 total cases with 12 new ones yesterday. It seems like we're averaging between about 10 to 25 new cases a day in the last couple of weeks. We have 6 cases currently in the 9303 zip code, which does not mean we told this, we clarified this with the county, that does not mean within the city limits of Ojai, but cases in the 93023 zip code. 28.
And aren't most of those recovered?
I believe most of those are recovered.
Yeah.
And there's been 1 new case in the last 2 weeks in the 93023. 28 hospitalized, 11 of those currently in the ICU, 19 deaths which is obviously unfortunate. And the county this morning at the Board of Supervisors meeting noted that there are expected to be a couple more that they're going to report in the next couple of days. They said that this morning. So,
And everyone had a comorbidity, right?
Yes, at this point. And so the positive is number of people tested, 13,700, which has really grown, and they're expanding the testing capacity, and I'll get to more on that in a moment. But the latest that's relevant really to Ojai that we wanted to make sure to explain, there's a lot of questions about it. A new public health order came out on May 7th. They're calling it the Stay Well Ventura County order. The county has stated that they're now their goal is shifted to safely reopening and getting in line with the state stay-at-home order. The state Governor Newsom announced that they have these phases and they're starting phase 2. The county's in line with that and is starting phase 2. And once certain criteria are met, they're going to start what they're calling the accelerated phase 2, which would be expected to include restaurants with limited capacity, offices, and malls, which we prepared this presentation over the weekend, and this morning the governor announced that offices and malls are already going to be reopening. So when they said accelerated, they really appeared to mean it.
The governor had a meeting with his finance director.
Yeah, unfortunately. So the order on May 7th, what it reopens here in the county is it allows retail businesses to reopen for curbside delivery or pickup. And essentially they have listed some retail sectors, but essentially they confirmed yesterday that it's almost all retail in the county can now reopen with curbside delivery or pickup. And it also allows the manufacturing and supply chain businesses to reopen as well. They also stated, which we get a lot of questions about here in Ojai, they stated that hotels and motels are able to continue to operate. The county stated today that it doesn't need to be an essential business you don't have to travel or stay in a hotel only for essential business, which was a change from what I had heard previously. So we're looking into whether that's accurate. But we get a lot of questions about that from residents because obviously people are still seeing that the hotels here have some business.
James, I can tell you for what it's worth, a new order came out 15 minutes ago from the county that includes stuff that goes into effect tomorrow. And it still lists specifically hotels, lodging for leisure and tourism are still not permitted.
Oh, interesting. Oh, for leisure and tourism. Yeah. That was my understanding. Yeah, the county today had said at the Board of Supervisors that they weren't sure if there was a limitation there, but every order I've read says there is a limit not allowing leisure and tourism. So I think that was actually just incorrect. But so I believe the answer to that is what Councilmember Blatch just said, which is hotels and motels can operate, but not for leisure and tourism.
Let me ask a question about that.
Yeah.
You mean to say that when I drive by that hotel as you enter town and the parking lot is completely filled, those are all people here on essential business? How do you track that?
Yeah, and that's a question we've asked the county to yesterday as well, as how that's being tracked, because we're getting a lot of questions about it, and we don't know at this point if how the county is tracking that. So that's something we're looking into and seeing if they are tracking it. So.
Mayor?
Yes, Randy.
So it says here businesses must self-certify. Mm-hmm. Does that mean the essential businesses that have been open have to certify also?
Yes.
Yes.
So wouldn't the county and wouldn't we have access to those records as to who has self-certified? So that might help Susan in that answer is if that business has a certification with the county for being an essential business. Now, it may not tell you how many people are actually there for that, but it would tell you, are they open for as an essential business? Does that make sense? Did I make sense, or did I confuse everyone?
No, I think that makes sense. And we had a meeting this morning to get set up to be able to access that data. Everything is happening very quick. The opening came Friday. We met today to be able to access that data so we can check and find out if businesses have self-certified or if they're open without self-certifying. So we can look at that. We can check and see if the hotels have certified and with what they have self-certified.
And James, do you know what the criteria for certification is?
So the county has some criteria available. I haven't looked at the counties because, and we'll get to this in a minute, the city has started to work on, or the city has put out our own checklist of self-certification. So we've been focused on that. We figure for within the city limits, if everybody is self-certifying with our requirements, we're comfortable. So we've been working on that. So I'm not, they have their self-certification requirements online, but I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the counties.
Well, I just think it would be important for the community to understand that we have a right to require certification also, and our certification could be stronger than the counties.
Yep, and I have a slide on that and a couple of
Thank you.
pages here.
Okay, James, is the sheriff on patrol going by and giving the people a little nudge when they forget about the social distancing? Over the weekend, when the visitors showed, to name one business, Beacon, which is right out there, on the avenue, the main drag. Normally, people are pretty careful around there, but boy, it was a crowd and people chatting away. I know it's a tough thing to enforce, but just reminders to these, to people, particularly from someone in uniform, might, as we start to reopen, if we're too lax, we're going to be in real trouble. Yeah,
and we've done kind of a combination. We are currently scheduling code enforcement on the weekends to try to address that and make sure people are wearing masks, which is still, I'll get to this too, but Ojai is still requiring, we've had questions about that. Ojai is requiring the face coverings. So we've had code enforcement here on the weekends to try to encourage people to do it. And we've talked to PD as well about when they see it, to encourage the social distancing. So we'll continue to do those things.
Okay, thank you.
And so the county and the state today, in the last couple of days, have laid out these as the 4 stages to reopen. I just wanted to kind of show, because we get a lot of questions about these types of issues, but we are currently in stage 2, and you'll notice it says gradually reopen retail, manufacturing, and logistics, which is what happened Friday, curbside only retail. And then it says later relax retail restrictions, adapt and reopen schools, childcare, offices, and limited hospitality personal services. And that continued today with the governor announcing that offices, and he also said malls were going to reopen for curbside as well. So it's going to be this gradual reopening of these items. And then stage 3 is reopening movie theaters, religious services, and personal and hospitality services. So those are the next couple of phases. Yes, Councilmember Wyrick.
I just want to point out something that I think is an increasing problem. And that is and just let the community know that I certainly am very concerned about it. And that's the implicit bias towards big box that is built into everything from the state all the way through the county. When they say retail curbside only, that just means except for big box. In effect, the big boxes are allowed if they happen to sell a little bit of food, like Target. You can go in and buy a piece of clothing and not curbside delivery. So that is a misnomer, and I consider it arbitrary, capricious, and discriminatory against small business. to say that since we're talking about defining risk, that it's a lower risk. What they're saying, which doesn't make any sense, is that it's a lower risk to go into a crowded Target to buy a pair of jeans than go inside Rains with much less crowds in the same or better physical distancing and buy a pair of jeans. And I consider that arbitrary, capricious, and discriminatory. And I think it's getting serious enough, the sort of implicit bias towards big box and industrial retail distribution, that we ought to think about, maybe composing a letter of concern both to the county and to the state regarding this, because it really disproportionately penalizes the way they're implementing this community-based cities like we are. That's my opinion.
May I speak?
Yes.
I wholeheartedly agree with Bill's opinion. I see no reason why some of our smaller stores can't have the same protocols as a grocery store. I mean,
or a Target or a Costco.
Yeah, but excuse me. I go by a small shop and I see a dress in the window and there's a sign that says you can call them up if you're interested in something or whatever. But why couldn't I go in by myself with a mask on, just one person at a time?
Right.
You know?
Right. And right now they say a crowd can go into Target to buy jeans, but we can't one at a time go into, a shop here and buy a pair of jeans there. It's just not fair. It's not right. And I consider it, again, capricious, arbitrary, and discriminatory.
Mayor?
Yes, Randy.
At least we're all going to chime in on this, but I think what's interesting is there's a lot of gray in some of these rules. And I think what we need to do is in Bill's thought process is to send a letter stating what we're going to do and why we're going to do it, and remove the gray in our benefit, and justify it like Bill's saying. Our big box in Ojai is Ben Franklin. Our big box in Ojai is Rains. And so therefore we're going to treat our mini-me's or our mini big boxes as big boxes in Ventura County. And I think we just justify it and we do it. And inform them that's why we're doing it, and move on.
Okay.
Other comments?
I have other comments when James is done and question.
Okay. I have a couple more. I'll try to keep it brief. We wanted to just point out some of the key points under the existing order. It still asks those 75 and older or those 70 and older with an active comorbidity to stay and follow, to stay at home and follow social distancing requirements. And then it lays out, encouraging to still get medical care, nutrition, exercise, etc. But that's still in the current order. The current order also requires food facilities to provide food through delivery or pickup for takeout or drive-through, and requires that the food be kept in a container. It requires, or it specifically says that the businesses that shall remain closed in Ventura County still include shared swimming pools, spas, hot tubs, and RV parks. And then also defines outdoor activities such as golfing, tennis, pickleball, walking, hiking, bicycling, gardening, and others as essential activity. So those are still in the order. We wanted to just point out, because we get questions about the distinctions between the city and the county. Just the general rules that a city can be more strict, not less strict than the state or the county in this case. We are still one of the cities in the county that have additional requirements in place above and beyond what the county is requiring. And it's because we believe our city is vulnerable due to our closed valley and higher average age than other cities. So we're taking that seriously. And, we had a lot of calls and emails from people saying that they were concerned that things were opening up too quickly. So in response to that, we still are the only city in the county that has a face covering requirement. But I also think it's important to note that The CDC's recommended it, and several other counties and cities have a face covering requirement. Just we're the only,
And the governor's recommending it.
yeah, we're the only ones in Ventura County. And I think realistically, it's going to be part of this reopening process at some point.
Well, Mayor,
Yes.
just
Randy.
regarding that,
Yeah.
I'm probably out in the county more than the rest of you, but the Santa Barbara, I was there the other day purchasing some lumber, and you can't enter there. They have face covering restrictions. Oxnard Home Depot has it. Ventura Lowe's has it. Even if the county is not requiring it, most of the businesses are. In fact, they're demanding it, that you can't enter the store without a face covering. So people recognize the benefits to it, whether it's an ordinance or a policy or not. People are still doing what's right and what's in the best interest of all of us.
We just wanted to take the chance to remind people, because we had a couple of people that called and said, I went out to Oxnard and this store and they don't have it. Are you still enforcing it? So the answer is yes at this time. We also, on Friday, when everything reopened for curbside delivery and pickup, we adopted our own checklist, and we issued an executive order. And I believe we're the only city that's done this as well. That an executive order requiring all businesses to self-certify with our city checklist. And the reason we did that is because we do have some additional requirements like the face coverings. We wanted an easy list for people to, for business owners to be able to just check off and make sure they have everything needed. It requires face coverings, appropriate sanitization measures, training for, to make sure employees are aware of what to look for and all those types of things. And a shout out to the Chamber of Commerce. Jamie was working and communicating with store owners, with us, and we were able to put that together with his help very quickly. The order came out Thursday night, and we had our checklist in place by Friday. And we've got.
He worked late into the night along with you.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So we have some, we wanted to make sure people are aware of these additional requirements. Again, we're trying not to be burdensome on businesses. We're trying to make it easy, but we do want people to know we are taking it seriously, and we're probably, I expect for the next, couple of weeks, we're going to have some additional requirements that other areas in Ventura County don't have, because we're taking it seriously. So.
Mayor, I don't know if you can see me raising my hand.
I can't, but go ahead.
Okay, James, I would think that the single most important thing for a business that's in the process of opening up is paid sick leave. To me, the most important thing is that if someone is sick or is coughing or has a runny nose, whatever, that they can stay home and not push themselves to go to work. So what are we doing about that? Is that a requirement? Can we legally require it? How does that work?
So in our checklist, we have measures taken to identify employees who are sick, and the requirement that if they are sick, they send them home. There's been a lot coming at us quickly, so I know that there's been some changes to paid sick leave. I don't remember them offhand, and I'm thinking City Attorney Summers probably does if he's.
Yeah, briefly, the new rules for paid sick leave are that all employers with between 50 and 500 employees have to require paid sick leave for any person who has symptoms of the COVID-19 or is under quarantine for COVID-19 under a couple of rules and regulations. So that's going to cover a lot of employers, not all though. For the Delta, for employers who aren't covered by subject to that federal requirement, employees may be eligible for any existing sick leave, and if they don't have an existing sick leave, the city does have the power, if it desires, to adopt that requirement to fill in the gap. We haven't yet done so, but we could do so if required or if desired by the council.
And that's 2 weeks paid sick leave, correct?
Yes.
But
and I should add that any employee, even if not covered by paid sick leave, would still have their job protected under the California Family Medical Leave Act, which again applies to most but not all California employers, depending in part on the size of the employee count.
I need a clarification on what you just said. Did you just say between 50 and 100 employees. That was one thing you said, right?
Yes, that's my recollection, and I'll confirm that number. But it doesn't apply to very large or small employers.
Okay,
And
so
admittedly, a number of our employers
well,
are going to be on that small side.
let's just take our grocery stores. If a checker is not feeling well, do all those check if they're not because of COVID or anything else, they just don't feel well. And are they, it seems like if we are indeed serious about this, that person can stay home and rest until they feel 100% healthy and not be docked pay.
I don't know the exact specifics of the number of employees that are held by the entities that own our grocery store, so I do not know whether or not those employees would or would not be eligible to take paid sick leave. But under the reopening protocols, the employer would be required to direct employees who are visibly ill from COVID-19 to stay home. Mm-hmm. But whether or not the employees are entitled to paid sick leave under present law depends in part on the size of the employer, and that I don't know about. The Vons, the Westridge, Rainbow Bridge is probably below that count, but Vons and Westridge are maybe above that count for employees.
Well, that seems to be, to me, that seems to be a real gap in, it just seems to me that to the benefit of the community, if we encourage, when people don't feel well, we encourage them to take good care of themselves. When you don't feel well, you don't go out in public. It doesn't mean that you have the virus or anything like that. You just don't go out during this pandemic. But people are not going to do that if they're living on the edge. If staying home for one day is the difference between, paying their rent, buying groceries. We're talking about a lot of people at places like Rainbow Bridge and in our small town that fall in that category. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. That somehow during this pandemic, that needs to be addressed. I don't know how, but it should be part of this discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Okay, thank you. Yes, Randy?
Mayor, I just know as a small business owner, I'm required to provide my employees all 24 hours of paid sick leave a year. So small business owners are required to do that. I imagine unionized stores like Vons and such probably have a paid sick leave or something like that, just like our employees do. And I believe if any of these stores have filed under the PPP, that if they get the funding, that they're using that to the benefit of all of their employees. So there's a multitude of resources out there that are taking care of ill employees or semi-ill employees or real ill. And I just think that each business has to look at what's available to help their employees out. And that's what most of us are doing.
Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, James?
So I think we have just a couple more slides with, we wanted to talk about this because it's a most frequent question we get by email online is, what testing options are there? The Ventura County Healthcare Agency, Monday, I believe, but the days are blending together. They announced expanded COVID-19 testing. I said last week, so apparently it was last week. And they noted that they're at the 7 urgent care sites and 2 additional sites that they now have 9 testing sites. Nearest to Ojai is unfortunately Ventura. That's the only challenge is we don't have one in the Ojai Valley. But they noted that essential workers can be tested and they give the contact information, which is on this slide, and that other Ventura County residents can call to be screened, but they're going to be screened based on whether they have the symptoms such as cough or shortness of breath and 2 of the following: fever, chills, muscle pain, headaches, sore throat, new loss of taste or smell. So that they're expanding it, they're trying to ramp up. This was a step forward of being able to offer it to groups of people. So that's where they're currently at. We get a lot of calls with people asking how to find out about that. So we wanted to provide it. And then this is kind of the update we've been given over the last couple of weeks, and we've just updated. just our ongoing city actions. We're still closing North Signal Street to reduce visitor traffic at the trails. We also found out today from, and I'll send this email out, but Ojai Valley Land Conservancy is actually going to be closing some trails this weekend. So every weekend, we're trying to watch and respond as needed when we start seeing more people come in or more traffic come in. So we're still going to continue that. Shared playground equipment in the skate park still remain closed per the state and county orders. Those are still groups that are not allowed to open. Virtual City Hall remains open, and we have code enforcement here on most weekends. We're still working with the farmers market on the social distancing protocols. We've gotten good feedback on that. We've also installed food pickup zones, and this week we announced to businesses that we're going to do retail business pickup zones, so that trying to create some spaces so that, Serendipity Toys, for example, is the one that took us up on it so far. We're going to create a little pickup zone so that somebody can shop there without having to, get a spot far away and can maintain their social distancing. So we're still doing that. We also distributed last week new face covering signs and the protocol checklists. We'll continue to roll those out. And today we launched a virtual recreation program, which is a page that has recreation videos from some of the favorite instructors, and people could go on and watch those and follow along. And we'll continue to provide information and updates on the website, Facebook, and Channel 10. And just, next steps, we had a couple things we wanted to talk about. We'll continue to be in contact with the county is a key thing, and we're investigating some outdoor ideas, and we're working through those, some outdoor dining and outdoor organized exercise options. Those are some of the things we've been getting asked about, so we're looking into those as things begin to open up. This is a key thing I wanted to talk about today.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It's not, from my first year on the job, I'm getting all the things that that nobody wants to do. But we're looking at the calendar. It is May 12th. We're less than 2 months from 4th of July. We normally start seeing the chairs, I'd say, at the end of this month for the 4th of July parade. And my recommendation at this point, my plan at this point, is to announce that until we know more, we can't allow the chairs on Ojai Avenue because of the, everybody walking by, touching them, being crammed into tighter spaces, potential spread. So
and also blocking the pickup zones.
And blocking the pickup zones. So I'm not, enjoying saying this, but I think it needs to be done. I think we say at this point it's until further notice. If things open up, we'll revisit. But at this point, if we see chairs, we're going to have to move them out of the way, and and move them over to and get them out of there. So I wanted to bring that up because we expect that it'll start happening, and I wanted to see if there's any feedback or thoughts. But
yeah, I would like to give you. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Yeah, I see you.
Oh, I was just going to say I want to give James some cover on this. I have been bothering him about this. I said if we end up with a couple hundred chairs out there and we have to try and jam the genie back in the bottle and return them or do something else, it was going to be a mess. So I do want to make it clear, though, and James, tell me if I say anything wrong, but we still have not figured out if we're having a parade, but we haven't canceled it. So it's still pending, but it hasn't been canceled. And we are not anticipating you won't be able to have a chair if there's a parade. It's just that right now we're trying to prevent chairs from being placed on Ojai Avenue early like they are traditionally. And as soon as we get that cleared up, there still may be more than ample opportunity to get your chair out there. If not early, then at least at the parade if we're going to have a parade.
Yeah, that's
okay,
exactly.
And we're still going to have a physical or social distancing of 7 or 6 feet, right?
We're expecting that still. It's
yeah, right. I mean, that's one of the conditions, at least around the country, that there's still even some of the liberal areas. I shouldn't say liberal areas, maybe the non-liberal areas, but places where they they don't even want to close their state. They are asking for that social distancing. They recognize that as a danger. The mess that they've had down in New Orleans and in Louisiana, because going ahead with the Mardi Gras, and the county fair has canceled. What message have we sent to the parade planners? Are they clear that they proceed at their own risk? Because it doesn't seem to me like in 6 weeks that we want everybody in the world to descend on Ojai and then have you and the police trying to keep them 6 feet apart. You know, it's usually just a mob on the sidewalks.
Yeah, I think we're clear, but we will make clear again. We did send a notice that, you know, depending on what order is in place, you know, it may not proceed, or it may proceed, you know, looking different than it has in the past. So
we can't be the only parade in the county.
Right. And a lot of them have canceled, you know, but the hard thing, it is a balance. It's hard, you know, do we, you know, we're 2 months out, things change quickly. You know, are we confident that it can't happen? You know, I think right now we're all kind of in the wait and see, but what will happen soon is the chairs. So that's what we're trying to address right away.
Well, you know, it seems that if the fair committee have decided that in August it's not going to be good, that goes way past our parade. I think we need to give some serious consideration. Ryan.
Well, I agree. The you know, the festivities around the parade we're going to have to look at more specifically, but we got to make a decision now that's well in advance, because traditionally these chairs show up well in advance of the parade, that we know that they're coming. And now they're not coming, to make that clear. But looking at the parade, the good news is we can social distance as far as we need to on Ojai Avenue with only clusters of people who've been staying together and have been quarantined together, and there should be enough room. Now, the festivities that happen after the 4th of July, but I would hope that unless there's a good reason to have to cancel it, and with more orders opening stuff up tomorrow, I mean, it says office businesses, you know, in this latest order pretty much opening. I'd hope that there'd be a way we could do it. And I think it just fits as a right date for an important moment for everybody. I think coming out of this, and I think for our local community, seeing as though it is kind of the one real big holiday of the year that's celebrated community-wide, maybe other than Ojai Day, which isn't necessarily a national holiday.
You know, a lot of people still have barbecues in their backyard, which would fit the social distancing. I guess I have some real concerns of what happens in Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is making noises like they're not going to open up even if the state starts rolling this thing out. If their numbers don't change, they're going to remain, you know, pretty tight down there. And guess what? All the people who feel like they're not, you know, at risk are going to get and come up to Ojai or places close by, like the beach, to celebrate. And I understand why they want to do it, but it just, I'm on the endangered species list, as I call it, the over 75 crowd. So I don't plan to be there. But for those of you,
if we have a parade, you're in it as the mayor. You can't get out of it.
No.
One of those.
The mayor pro tem is going to represent us.
We'll put you in the mobile thing with the glass.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, we'll borrow the Popemobile.
You're going to walk and shake everybody's hand, Ryan.
Susan asked to be recognized, and I'll come to Randy.
Mayor, I share your concerns, and not just because I'm 71 and getting in the endangered species category, but I think it just seems so extreme. Right now we're closing the playgrounds, which I want to discuss also. It just seems very extreme to go from this lockdown to thinking we can have a crowd control on the 4th of July. To me, that's completely unrealistic. And I would sit down with the committee and explain what, you know, from everything that we're seeing, what they're predicting. It just seems like we should encourage healthy activity. People can be in, if they can't social distance in their own backyard, how do we expect them to do that? You know, and if we go opening up the parks, it just feels like it isn't part of a gradual transition to be planning for the 4th of July. And if with the county closing the fair, I think it just feels from one extreme to the other to be thinking we can have the 4th of July. celebration in 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Randy, you wanted to say something?
Well, quickly, I was going to say we could get the Pope Mobile for you, but Mayor,
Get what?
The Pope Mobile.
Oh.
I have it flown in from the Vatican for you, but here's this is where I think about this daily, is the double-edged sword that we have in our community. Is, first of all, we're the healthiest community in the county. We have the fewest number of sickness and the fewest. We're the healthiest.
And we have the lowest rate per 100,000 in the whole county.
But I'm just saying, in the county, in our little area, and the hardest part for me is I think about as we want to open and we need to open, and I understand that we're also going to be the biggest attraction. If I live in LA and I want to go to a safe city to spend a weekend or to spend a day, I mean, Ojai has a bright light shined on it. I know we're not doing any marketing. I know that we're not doing any publicity about who we are, what we are, and how safe we are, but it's out there. And that's that to me is the fine line we walk between how do we open and how do we open safely for our community members, and then how do we prevent, lack for a better word, but because we can't, but how do we prevent the overflow from all these other communities coming in and just using us. So it's a fine line that we have to walk, and I know we're all aware of it. I know we all are. And I just think we have to be careful with what we do and how we do it, and also how it gets out into the public domain. I understand we're in Bon Appetit, Ojai City again. So there's a cover magazine about us and what we are and who we are and what we're doing.
Really?
And so I just think it's important that we recognize that. And so again, as much as I want to parade and as much as I'd like to see it, the idea that we're a safe community, and now we're having a large parade, and Ventura isn't having theirs, and Santa Paula isn't having theirs, and Carpinteria isn't having theirs. I mean, we're going to be a fatal attraction. And I just think we have to be careful about this.
I agree with you, Randy. I think it's a very high risk situation. I think we wait a couple more weeks, but I don't think we wait till the last minute to say yes or no. But it seems to me right now that if the parade were just to be, small groups of locals, carrying flags and riding bicycles and that sort of thing, just in commemoration of the 4th of July, that'd be one thing, but that's not what it is. We're probably best known as the only old-timey small town parade, horses and the whole, routine and music. It just seems like we're sending an invitation to the outer world. And if Los Angeles is still, the hot spot, in the bad sense, a hot spot, and they're shut down, guess where the people are going to come? We don't have to advertise. All you have to do is put Ojai in on the internet, and everybody knows. So, are there other comments on this before we get?
Mayor, I have a comment.
Yeah, Ryan.
I respectfully disagree with all of that. I think that that's not science-based. That's feeling-based. I don't think that being outside, being.
You say this as a lawyer or as a doctor?
Well, I'm saying this as a council member who's done a lot of research, talking to a lot of doctors, and I don't think any of you are doctors either. Last time I checked, so I don't think.
I said I'm just following the science.
It's quite a violation of my responsibility here, but I just disagree. I haven't heard from any doctors that it was a horrible idea. I haven't heard the state prohibiting specifically parades or any type of gatherings like that. And I think that it's completely different when you talk about a parade, that you don't have people from LA who want to come see our Little League baseball team ride in the parade and see the local mayor wave to everybody. I don't think it's an attraction out of town. I mean, we've been to the parade how many times? It's as all of the quaint Ojai-ness as there is. The 4th of July is not a big out of town draw for people to come and see our local community. And that's why I think it's important. And of course, I would defer to anyone who knows better than I or any of us regarding the protocols that might be necessary to do it. But at this point, to take it off the table, I just think is premature. And I didn't know. I'm glad to hear the sense of the council, because it's been concerning, because the parade itself has kind of been on Facebook talking like they were certain that they were carrying on. So I thought maybe
That's what they're saying, and that's
Yeah.
where I'm getting calls from people who are greatly concerned, saying, why are you people doing this? We've gone through all this for the locals, and now you're going to open things up with a carnival, in effect. What about the fireworks show and all that?
Well,
I agree we could wait a
If
couple
you
of weeks,
wanna
but I'm
get
not asking we do something tonight, but I think we should think seriously and you should continue your research with the scientists, because what you're hearing, what I'm hearing, apparently is different.
Well, the idea that if you don't want to go to the parade, don't go to the parade. I mean, the idea about
No, that's not the idea. I'm not saying this for me. I'm saying it for you and for the rest of the community. If we end up inviting the world in, let's see what happens. Germany was considered to be one of the great examples of how to do this, and now they're starting to have problems. It's
well, their 4th of July isn't nearly as important as ours, I don't think.
yeah. Well, it's a little. I wouldn't make light of it like that, Ryan. But go.
Well, I mean,
I get your point.
What Germany's doing about parades right now. Last time I heard about a parade in Germany, I'm pretty sure we don't want to talk about it. So
No,
I just think it's fair to decide, and I'd like to get more information and maybe put it on a future agenda, maybe the next council meeting.
Okay.
Right. No one's suggesting anything other than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I second Ryan's motion to put it on next council agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I want to may I make a comment? If you're talking
Yes.
about the parade, you're also talking about opening up Libby Park and the playground. I'm already sick to death of seeing that yellow tape. I want to tell you what I observed. You know where the kids are playing now? They're playing in Libby Bowl. They're playing on the stage. They're running around in between the seats and flipping them upside down. You're going to see kids playing in the park somewhere. And to me, an outdoor playground where kids are running around, they're not sitting still, to me, that's a low risk activity. And it saddens me deeply to see the playground tape. So if you're going to be discussing and considering, I have my own ideas about all of this, but it just seems, believe me, I do.
I'm sure you do.
But I'm very respectful of the fact that there are vulnerable people in the community. For that reason, I'm happy to wear my mask. I'm happy not to cough on anyone. I abide by the social distancing protocol. But to me, the children running around in the park are not the vulnerable population. And if you go forward with the 4th of July, the park needs to be opened up. That would be just absurd. That's all I want to say.
So Mayor,
Randy, go.
I just wanted to chime in, just a joyful response to Ryan that I appreciated his feelings also. But it is interesting. I was at Libby Park Saturday night at 7:00. And Susan, I did observe the same thing that you just said, and it made me uncomfortable. There were 12, 15 young kids, sitting in the bowl, and they were eyeing at me as much as I was eyeing them, because I knew exactly what they were going to be doing, and they didn't want to do it in front of an adult. We had kids riding skateboards up on the stage, and I asked them to not remove themselves from the facility, but to not ride on the stage, but ride down on the asphalt where the damage is less. And then I came across a group of adults on the tennis courts dancing to loud music, trying to social distance, but the reality was they were and they weren't. So, all of it is just going to be difficult to do. But I want to throw this thing out about children. There's law enforcement officers and first responders that have children that might be more vulnerable to this virus than other children. Let's say Susan's daughter's child. I don't know if you would want those kids interacting with your daughter's kids if you knew the situation that their parents are in. So that's what I'm trying to say. There's a fine line here between what we do and how we do it, when we do it. And I just think that we need to lean to the safe practice versus the hurry up practice. That's just my 2 cents.
Bill, did you want to say something?
Just one short comment, Ryan. I think we're all a little on edge seeing the effect of having the beaches closed in Ventura County, at least the parking aspect, and the result of that in our trails and up in our mountains has just been overwhelming. And I think it's just a data point for us to consider relative to the July 4th aspect.
Okay, James, where are we?
If I could say one thing to just the playgrounds, we actually did reach out to the county because we heard council loud and clear last meeting that was a priority. The county did say, and it goes back to what we said earlier, if we can be more strict, not less strict, and the county said, and they confirmed with the state that they currently are not allowed by either the state or the county to be open. So it's not we're not making the choice to keep those closed. That's an order from the state and the county, which I know the county did release a new one a couple weeks ago, but I didn't expect that to change on that order. So sounds like somebody, no.
James, I had a question regarding parking, the parking lot at our facilities.
Uh-huh.
I know that we're not allowed to picnic, and I know we're not allowed into the play areas.
Mhm.
Is there any reason that the parking lots aren't open for people to park when they want to walk the facility or walk their dog in the facility or to exercise on the facility?
No, I actually was going to bring that up. A lot of agencies kept them closed for Mother's Day because of the fear of parties at the park. So we had them closed through Mother's Day was our plan. So I was planning to try to reopen the parking lots at the park this week, unless there's any objection.
Yeah.
So we had Easter and Mother's Day in a short period, so those were the two reasons why they were closed. But
Great.
so we can get those reopened. The last thing is we'll put an item on the next agenda for the 4th of July parade, and we'll ask the 4th of July committee to provide a plan of what they're planning to do for that meeting. So, and then last on this next steps plan, as we're seeing currently, and as we saw with that new order coming out Friday, another new order coming out today, but orders are coming out quickly. We're trying to respond as quickly as we can. And so one of the ideas we had that I wanted to see if council was interested in is creating an ad hoc committee with 2 members of council to weigh in and recommend protocols for these things as the new public health orders develop, and to allow they could be liaisons to get feedback from residents, businesses, other agencies, etc. And so we were proposing that as a solution to these, the Thursday night order that we have to implement Friday, and again, tonight's another example, a Tuesday night order that apparently we'll be implementing tomorrow. So, we've proposed that, but obviously council, can either decide to take that recommendation or to just have staff continue to do so.
Mayor, I would volunteer.
Go ahead. Okay, we have one volunteer. Is there a second?
Bill, I would volunteer.
You would volunteer? Okay. Any other nominations? Self-nominate? If not, okay. Does the council have any problem with the subcommittee of Bill and Randy looking into this? And if not, okay, so ordered. Good luck, guys. Tough job.
And thank you, James. Fabulous job.
Thank you.
Yes.
So that's all we had. That's all. It's a lot, but that's the latest on coronavirus.
Okay, is there anything else from the council on coronavirus before we
Yes.
move to the next one?
Mayor, before you move on, I have one clarification if I could.
Okay, city attorney.
Thank you,
Matt.
Mr. Mayor. Mayor and Council, I took the opportunity to double check my notes on the paid sick leave issue, and the Federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act applies to all private employers with 500 or less employees. So a small business like Rainbow Bridge is going to be subject to that, which provides for 2 weeks of paid sick leave for people who are sick or under quarantine at most of their full salary with a cap of $5,000, and 2/3 of their salary with a cap of $2,000 for caregivers who are, for example, caring for someone at home who is sick or is out of school. There's certain restrictions applicable depending on the size of the employer, but a small business like River Bridge would be covered with certain restrictions. Thank you.
And thank you. May I ask a question?
Yes, Susan, go.
I just want to make sure that that Rainbow Bridge, for example, knows about this. Do we take that for granted that they have that information?
I would suggest that one of the things that the ad hoc committee that the council just created to take a look at is making sure that the businesses in the community are aware of the benefits and the obligations that they are under the new rules.
Okay. And Jamie of the chamber knows this, James?
I think Jamie does, but we're in contact, so we'll make sure he's aware and ask him to send an email blast. He's been sending out email blasts on PP and all that. So.
That was great information, Matt. Thank you.
Mayor, also, I believe the EDC is putting out things annually along with Jamie. So there's a lot of, Susan, there is a lot of this information being shared, but it wouldn't hurt for us to make a concerted effort to do it also.
Yeah, I think that Jamie and Bruce are doing a good job at that, at least all of the stuff I see on the internet.
Yes.
Okay, should we move to the next item, James?
One more thing on this, please.
Yes.
James, are we following up on the nursing homes? How's everything going? Because the reports nationally are just abysmal, the number of deaths.
Yeah. So we've been in contact with them. We have that information, that chart we prepared, and we've updated that so we can get that out and then and discuss that too. It is, the information that's come out lately has been pretty depressing countrywide, but we were seeing pretty good measures and responses taken by the local groups. So
yes, it looked good. It looked good. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Levin and his people were on this about 2 weeks ago, when other jurisdictions weren't even reporting it.
That's one of the real success stories for Ventura County, I think.
Yeah.
Well, also for Ojai.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the moratorium on commercial evictions. James?
Yeah, this is back on the agenda. We had brought this a couple of weeks back, and as we were bringing it, the state enacted their own commercial eviction moratorium. So at that time, I think it was on March, or it was in April. I don't have April 28th, no, April 14th. And we reviewed it, discussed it, and council ultimately decided to evaluate, take a couple of weeks, see how the state's moratorium is implementing itself, and then come back if needed. So last council meeting, we were asked to bring it back. So it's the same moratorium with the, I have a screen share on, I'm sorry. It's the same moratorium we provided before with a 6-month period for people to catch up once the coronavirus pandemic has ended. So.
Okay, Bill?
And so my understanding, Mr. Summers, is that the current judicial council blanket absolute prohibition about proceeding with any evictions right now expires 90 days after the stay-at-home order is lifted?
Correct. The Judicial Council's orders, which are its emergency order number 1 that blocks unlawful detainer actions, which is an eviction lawsuit, that expires 90 days after the governor lifts his state of emergency, which we don't yet know when that will be. It may be sometime.
So that's at least a couple months, and then you tack on 3 months on top of that.
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor, can I get a clarification on that also?
Yes, go right.
Matt, does that preclude you from filing an eviction notice? Or you cannot file for an eviction notice until after this pandemic is called off?
What it literally precludes,
grace period.
Yeah, what it literally precludes is the court clerk issuing the summons, to which is then, in the course of initiating a lawsuit, you file the complaint with the court, who then gives you a summons, which you then have to serve upon the person you're suing. And the summons is the order from the court that says, by the power of the state, you're compelled to respond to a lawsuit within a specified amount of time. And that's what attaches jurisdiction. That's what allows the court to have the power to rule over you. With the summons issuance blocked, a landlord could file the complaint, but the summons can't be issued, the person cannot be served, the case cannot move forward. So a landlord can take all steps short of serving the complaint upon the person, which then triggers their obligation to respond generally within 5 days. The usual rule is within 5 days. One of nuisance orders extended that to 60 days for eviction suits once they're revived. So a landlord can take action short of a lawsuit, a demand letter, even a notice of eviction, collection actions through the credit rating systems, but they could not serve the lawsuit, which would then be the predicate to getting an order to the sheriffs to remove the person, to remove the commercial tenant.
They couldn't serve the lawsuit until this coronavirus has been lifted.
Right, until 90 days after the governor has lifted his coronavirus state of emergency order.
So what was Bill alluding to? What was Councilman Wyrick alluding to when he said the 2 month? He said there's a 2 month period and then there's a 90-day period. Bill, can you clarify that?
Yeah, I think we're probably at least 2 months out before the stay-at-home order is completely lifted, at least. And then whatever, I don't think anybody thinks it's going to be lifted before 2 months. The last phase, and then you add 3 months on top of that to whenever the governor finally does the total lifting of the stay-at-home order or emergency order. So it's 3 months on top of the lifting of the emergency order whenever that happens by the governor.
And I'll add that I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't expect to lift the order anytime, even through the end of the summer.
Right.
It'll be adjusted as we've been discussing. It'll be allowed reopening through the resilience roadmap, but the lifting of the state of emergency is unlikely to happen on the immediate short-term basis.
That's what I was alluding to, Randy.
So to clarify this, so technically, there is no action that is going to happen to any commercial entity during this time frame until this order is lifted, and then a 90-day grace period before any action could even be taken. So the most a commercial owner could do would be to do his homework and file some paperwork. But technically, there's going to be no process taking place until the state of the virus is lifted and the grace period has expired.
Within the confines of the judicial system, that's correct.
Okay.
Landlord could take, for example, send a debt to collections. He could take actions outside the judicial system that may have an impact upon the tenant's situation. That's not subject to this control. And the other thing I'll just note that I think we noted in the staff report is the main delta that's on the table for the council to consider tonight would be if you adopted the proposed local commercial evictions moratorium, what it would add on top would be that the commercial tenants would have a 6 month period to repay back rent from the date of the local termination. And that would be, depending on how it shakes out, the local termination may be coterminous with the governor's orders, or it might be before or after. So it would provide a tenant a defense to, say, a collection action by a landlord seeking the rent earlier.
Is that covered anywhere in our ordinance?
That would be what would be if you adopted the proposed local commercial eviction moratorium. That's the main delta. Now that the state has adopted the block on new eviction lawsuits. And I saw Councilmember Blatz had his hand, but I'll defer to the mayor.
Okay, other comments?
I only have a comment.
Yeah, Ryan, and then I'll get to you, Susan.
I just want to make a couple clarifications. The order that we would be relying on is a judicial council order, which is a subset of the state government and a group of elected officials that's similar to a committee. And they can change this order at any time. They don't require any review by the governor. They can unilaterally change it. The 90-day sunset clause is also modifiable and is currently under review which is part of this order, and that's the 90 days after the emergency is lifted. It's not built in as a grace period. It's built in as a sunset clause. And the Sheriff's Association is lobbying them to modify that sunset clause, which we don't know whether they modify it for the entire Judicial Council order or just for the part that the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Association is worried about, which is the zero bail. And I know Senator Hannibal Jackson was talking about she is lobbying to get it changed so recidivists who are getting checked back into the jail do have a bail set. So there are a few things on it that takes, we can't say for certain that 90 days and that every term in the Judicial Council's order will stay the same. And it may not even totally be consistent with the governor, but we don't necessarily think the Judicial Council is going to get way out of line. But it is completely out of our control, and it's not absolute that it's going to be guaranteed for those 90 days. The other thing that's different that I've seen in a number of these local ordinances is a lot of the local ordinances have a written requirement to inform the landlord within 30 days of the rent becoming due of something in writing, talking about the harm that you have. The Judicial Council order does not have that. So there is that element to it that's a little bit different as well. And then also there is an exception. You can, Randy, it's very limited and it's not going to be easy, but if you do need to evict someone or have a summons issued for an unlawful detainer, if you claim there's a health and safety issue, you can get a hearing in front of a judge, a special hearing where they'll determine that. And under those circumstances, like the property we had in Ojai where there was the landlord that was violating a litany of rules, for example, that situation, they wouldn't necessarily be protected under these rules. And the only other thing I'll add is that, again, it's, we've seen how the big box stores get treated differently than the smaller places. And the reason this more expansive order is in place in a lot of those cities where there's big box stores is because it was their lobbyists and their infrastructure on the corporate level who was lobbying for it. And they've been afforded this extra protection that I think is even more important for our local commercial businesses in Ojai.
Okay, Souza was next, and then I'll come to you, Randy.
Thank you.
Souza?
Randy can go next. I'm mulling over what Ryan said.
Okay, Randy.
Well, I guess the struggle I have with this is the fact that not all commercial landlords are wealthy. And so what happens to the commercial landlord that cannot deal with someone not making their payment or making their obligation, and that person doesn't want to work with the landlord on something? So I guess that's where I struggle with putting something in place that prevents some form of action. Is there are good people, and then there's people that'll game a system, and then there's people that don't necessarily know how to communicate what their needs or their issues are, and that's another subset. That's where I struggle with this. Is I don't know if it's an issue in Ojai. I haven't heard it being an issue countywide, but maybe it's just something that I'm not attuned to. So,
Ryan?
Yeah, Randy, I agree, but but the situation, like I've been talking a lot to a local salon owner in town. They can't open. They're not allowed to. They're under a lot of stress. They're not going to be able to make rent. The only option they have is to not pay it. Now, every month that they don't pay it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't go away. It doesn't mean that they're not personally liable for it because they personally signed the lease that their landlord made them sign. Most landlords don't let you sign the lease as an LLC or as a corporation or a DBA. They usually want that personal level of liability. And now if they're not going to do anything, then that's their opportunity. And if they want to run their business into the ground in 6 months, have a huge bill that they may have to pay anyway, and not work with their landlord, then that is a reality. But I don't know how if they do have to pay the landlord, if it's 3 months earlier, then they're getting evicted 3 months earlier, and they're on their way out. The landlord's going to take their security deposit, and they're going to get a judgment against them as part of the unlawful detainer for the remaining interest, for the remaining money that's owed. If you are stuck as a salon owner right now where you just can't open, it may be a good 6 months after this that you need the wiggle room to get back on your feet, to get consistent. think about it. In 3 months and 1 day, you're $1 short on all that back rent you owed. Your business is gone. If that landlord has a better option or somebody he thinks he can move it for because they've had you on the hook, you've been there a tenant for 10 years, but they think there's a better train coming, then this is the level of protection that gives them that. And then the other thing is, if they're not in a month-to-month rental, if they have a year-long or multi-year lease, even if they can't afford this in those 6 months, they're still on the hook for the entire lease in a commercial lease. If I sign a 3-year lease, which is very industry standard, and 6 months in, I can't pay it, when I leave, I'm still on the hook for 2 years and 6 months worth of rent that I can't necessarily pay, and I'm going out of business. Now, the landlord can, if I leave, the landlord can try and re-rent it, but they're under no obligation to under a commercial lease. It's a little different than a residential lease. So those extra 6 months are the little bit of extra leverage and that little bit of extra wiggle room. I wish we could make an order. I just don't think we can. I don't think it would change enough that said specifically these businesses that are locked up until we get to like phase 3 that are really being extra hurt at no fault of their own. They're the ones who I wish, were the only ones who necessarily had access to this extra part, because I think they're the ones who are the most in need, and that's why it's there. But if we can't tailor it to only fit them, then I think we're better aiming at everybody and helping everybody rather than missing some of those at-risk few.
Other comments? Souza, have you mulled?
Yeah, Ryan answered all my questions. It's a dilemma, but I voted for this last time, and I'll vote for it again.
I have another.
Okay, well, we need a motion. What, Bill?
Yeah, I just to speak to Ryan, then I'll let someone make a motion. I think that you put your finger on the problem, Ryan, in that this is a broad stroke. It's not tailored. And so it ends up being, commercial relationships are negotiated generally. And so what this does is, and I can tell you for certain that what we're seeing around in the commercial real estate business is that you get a range of responsible behavior. I'll give you an example. There's places that pizza is doing great. They're grossing more than they ever have in many places. Okay. And yet we have some pizza tenants saying, I'm not going to pay my rent, even though they have better cash flow than they've ever had. So I think the problem is unintended consequences, where we end up being kind of interfering with the situation in terms of the negotiations. And we also, I think, I'm worried about putting a burden on staff in terms of enforcement with all the other things that are going on. So that's why I really have some problems with the possible unintended consequences.
If I can comment on the question at hand, Section 4 of Attachment A, page 3, which is the proposed resolution imposing, directive from the Emergency Services Director, does include a set of criteria. It is somewhat broad, but it is a set of criteria. It's entitles persons who are entitled to take advantage of this protection would be those who've had a substantial financial impact related to the COVID-19, defined as documented substantial decrease in a tenant's household or business income as a result of a list of 5 things.
But is that up to staff? Is that up to staff to enforce?
It would be up. This is structured to be up to the landlords and the tenants to enforce it among themselves, subject to later judicial resolution.
Yeah, what I was going to say, Matt, is doesn't this create it? And I don't want to get confused because I've read so many cities. I don't want to confuse it with ours, but and I don't remember if it's like it in ours, but where I've seen it before is it creates. Yeah, it's in here. It grants an affirmative defense, so it's significantly different procedurally. This won't make any difference to the non-attorneys in reality, but the difference between the judicial counsel saying the court can't issue a summons is significantly different in the process than saying a tenant has an affirmative defense to their eviction upon a showing of it being COVID related. And what we're really saying here is that assuming the judicial counsel stays on the 90-day sunset clause, then between those 90 days and the other 90 days that would extend it into 6 months, the difference would be that a summons could be issued, but then it would be an affirmative requiring that means that the burden is on the tenant, not on the landlord, to do a showing as it is now. It's on the tenant to actually show that they were burdened by COVID to get that extra 3-month extension. So it's much more difficult, Bill, for what it's worth, under that in that section of it to you do have to have some affirmative showing, and that means you got to show up in court and at least say something to the judge. It's broad, but I mean, it does make you have to show up in court.
You got to hire an attorney and show up in court. Yeah.
As to put that a little bit in a practical example, if the landlord and the tenant, the commercial tenant, were in disagreement over the reduction in business income, then at the 91st day after the governor's order expires, the landlord could file the lawsuit, and then when it gets to hearing, the tenant could say, no, I was protected by this. Here's my affirmative defense. And they would have to prove that up to the court's satisfaction that they were under the protection of this order because they had substantial decrease in business income. And if the judge accepted it, then they would be protected. If not, then they'd be out unless they could pay the rent.
Hypothetically, in Bill's analogy, right? I mean, the pizza place making money, unless they had something to show, wouldn't necessarily be eligible for that. But the salon that couldn't open because they were closed up until a much later date because of their priority of.
You're still in court litigating.
Yeah, well, I mean, it
would be subject to litigation, yes. And yeah, those two examples, the pizza place probably couldn't make that showing unless probably couldn't make that showing. The salon place with zero income could make that showing. And how exactly it'll be, what level of proof the courts will be looking for will be up to the courts. It is key to recognize this is structured to be a set of rights handed to tenants for them to enforce themselves. The city is not, proposed to create a whole set of rights to be affirmatively enforced by the city.
So it'd be a conflict settled by litigation matter
between the two parties that are already in contract.
Of course, unless they negotiate.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, well, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution as written.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second. I
Okay.
forgot to turn on my unmute. Okay.
Okay, is there further discussion? Well, if not, I guess we let it roll call vote.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm here. I was trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Okay, Mayor Johnston,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick,
No.
Councilmember Haney,
You know, I'm going to have to vote no because I think it's already covered. That's my gut on this. So it's no, sorry.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Item number 5, General Plan Annual Progress Report. James.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this very brief. We're catching up on some of these things, which is a good thing. But this is the city's 2018 and 2019 General Plan Annual Progress Report. We're required by the government code to file an annual progress report. The city hadn't done this for the last couple of years, so it's one of the things that we are getting up to speed on. And credit to Lucas, our community development manager, for getting up to speed on these things. But we have put together this general plan progress report that's attached to the packet. It lays out things like planning activity, building activity, code enforcement activity. It lays out the types of things that the Planning Commission has done in the last 2 years. The Building Appeals Board, all the different groups that we have. And so we have prepared the update by government code. We are required to bring it to council for for public comment. And we have not received any public comment on it, but we brought it today for review and hopefully approval to submit it to the HCD and the Office of Planning and Research.
Okay, are there any comments or questions?
Move, receive, and file.
Okay,
Okay.
we got a motion and a second. Is there any objection? If not, so ordered. Okay, good, James. I'm glad we're starting to get up to date. I remember a few years back, we hadn't done it for a 3-year gap.
Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah,
A good report. A good report. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, council member reports. Randy.
Actually, no, we're good.
Okay, Souza. Are you out there, Souza?
Who's that?
Oh, she's on mute.
I'm here. I had to leave for a moment. Can you go to someone else in case I think of something?
No, I'm sorry. You'll have to. No, okay. Bill.
These are reports, Mayor.
Just making everybody aware that I think 3 times was the charm, and the school board finally released the awardee for the exclusive right to negotiate to start speaking with the city. I had a call, from that group. Happy to report that, and I urge them to contact the city manager with respect to that good news and their desire to try to work constructively with us.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Ryan.
We had an air pollution control district meeting today. There are not a lot to report. A few of us, Supervisor Parks and I, had both asked Director Lockey to provide us with some information as what I'm calling the grand experiment that is everything Corona related. And one of those small grand experiment part of our grand experiment is what it's like to not have cars on the road.
Yeah.
And in Ventura County, I can tell you that we are about, just in Ventura County, which the delta is not as nearly as significant as in LA County and other places, but NOx was 10 times lower on average about every single day. The ozone created, which is the big pollution problem in Ojai, which is you get your NOx gas and you get your what's the other one? I can't remember what the other one is, and the heat, and that's why we have a lot of it up here, or the organic compounds that meet together. And the heat wave a few weeks ago, it's interesting. The data for air pollution is probably the most consistent data for how much people were traveling, and probably proportionally weren't social distancing. So what's interesting is the heat wave we had last week where it got really hot, all of the car pollution went up significantly over that weekend, and all the monitoring stations in LA and in Ventura County, and then has gone back down. But the numbers out of LA are pretty amazing. And one of the things we discussed today that seems so simple, we used to talk about this at APCD a couple of years ago too, is if everybody just didn't drive one day of the week, it would reduce pollution by 20%. Well, now nobody says if you just don't drive one day a week. Now what everybody says is if you just telecommute via Zoom one day a week, we can all reduce by 20%. And cost effectiveness in productivity to reduce pollution by 20% before this is, probably would have cost the county $15 billion. To do it under, what we've done here has not nearly cost that much in productivity. It's not, obviously there's a lot of businesses that work well under it and some that don't, but, these policies and these things, I'm really hoping we can try and trap a little bit of, and that great data. And then I also hope in the long term that the ideas of telecommuting and what I think may be working vacations from cool places that you go that aren't far away, that Ojai is a great destination midweek for people that want to do that and use their telecommute days, which I expect to see as a incentive to a lot of employees, especially in the LA area. Other than that, I went up to Piedras Blancas and I was at the end of Matilaha Canyon over the weekend. And obviously we've all heard about, I assume everybody's heard about what was going on at Punch Bowls. Punch Bowls is a lot closer to LA than north of us. But man, I've never seen as many cars at Piedras Blancas on Sunday in the many, many times I've been up there. But I will say all the trash was on top of the trash can. I didn't see a lot floating around. Nobody was doing anything weird. I'm sure there was a lot of people that probably didn't do everything perfect, but everybody who I saw, and I saw dozens and dozens of people, were very respectful and were treating the trails very well. So that was nice to see up there. And at the end of Ojai Canyon, which for I assume I'm sorry, all counselors. I don't know if all our staff's ever been up there, but I know all the council members have. That's a very long, kind of gnarly, tight road. There are a lot of cars back there. Again, everybody was being respectful who I saw. It was an absolutely beautiful day. But at the end of Ojai Canyon, there was probably 60 cars at 3:30 on Sunday. Just so significantly more than any time I've ever been up there. So that is real. But unlike at Punch Bowls, there wasn't really. I mean, I have to say people are being pretty respectful. Great to see them enjoying the outdoor environment. Let's just keep our eye on making sure they respect it as they need to.
Thanks, Ryan. Souza.
I had a VCTC question for Ryan.
Oh, go, Bill.
Okay.
What?
Ryan, I've been reading around the world, actually. There's a number of studies and organizations like VCTC that are looking at the fact that there's an aversion to traditional mass transit that's growing in a lot of places. And the alternative is bicycles, and more emphatic on the importance of providing for bicycle commuting, and especially with the technical innovation of electric bikes, the practicality of bicycle commuting as an alternative to mass transit, which has unfortunately been one of the major vectors of infection, is getting really seriously looked at around the world. And I wondered if, for example, we could support that by thinking about, when we have some cash flow, installing more electric bicycle charging stations, not just car charging stations, but also in importance for Ventura County to be looking at, more enhanced bike lanes for commuting as an alternative to traditional mass transit. And I was wondering if this discussion has come up at all.
Well, not a ton, especially the hard part with bike infrastructure is there's not a lot of consistency in the batteries that you can have common charging stations. So that's one real big difficulty. A lot of them have different connectors, although they're all the same, essentially the same parts in the battery. They all connect differently. So I know that's difficult, but I completely agree. I mean, one thing I would like to see is we're obviously, it's easy in a government sense. I say easy. We're the first city that did it. It's easier to look at equipment that the cities use and say, let's pull that out. Let's spend some money, turn it electric. What I really hope is that when Souza talks about the paradigm shift, we're getting a little taste of it now. But to me, and being an electric bicycle owner, it's how do we incentivize individuals to learn how to commute on their regular short distance, not commutes necessarily to work, because that's a little difficult, but your errands and your other stuff, especially in the Ojai community. I mean, it's so functional and easy and smart and nice to use, and there's so many benefits of it. I'm hoping that we can see that in the longer term. I mean, anywhere where we can get rid of a car trip and replace it with a bike trip is the low-hanging fruit in the long term that I hope can interact with that. I will say this, Bill. We did today approve a bunch of funding for a number of chargers for buses. Almost the entire school fleet, as quick as it was going to natural gas and other cleaner alternative fuels, is going electric really, really quickly. Okay. And I hope that that's going to lead by example too, because the more the size and functionality of that type of equipment being able to be used electric will make it so much easier. I mean, I can envision that a bus station or a bus stop for the school district is also where the community and the entire school district charges their lawn equipment from now on and things like that. Yeah. That technology really has to be built. But we have it's a good question you asked too, because we have a meeting with Lockheed in, I can't remember, James, you remember, is it soon?
Yeah, this week.
About exactly
the additional,
bring that up.
And just the additional wrinkle is the bicycle for bus and the bicycle for light rail substitution that we're starting to see around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Souza?
Oh, I'll just follow up on that. First of all, there is a lot of information coming in. I'm not prepared to report on it, but on the relationship between air pollution and the vulnerability to COVID-19. So that ought to motivate people to help to do their share to keep the air clean. And then I want to follow up with Ryan on what you said about batteries needing different charging stations. I didn't follow that, because everybody I know, you just charge your battery in your electric socket. So anyway, that's
Charging stations he's referring to, and they're different. You can get it.
Yeah, what I mean, Sousa, just to be clear, is you might plug into the same outlet, but the part that goes into the outlet that comes out that plugs into your battery, that part's different, and that's the part that has to be designed for each individual bike battery. And like, for example, I don't think the part that plugs in the wall that plugs into my battery, I don't think it would work on your battery on your bike.
Okay, well, let's get together and figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. This is reports. What, do you have a report for us? Or are you all done?
I'm going to save my report for next time. Thank you.
Okay. So it's, I only have a brief report. After what, 3.5, almost 4 years, the OBGMA is seriously going after their SIGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Plan. And there's going to be a hearing for a rate increase to the pumpers in order to pay for it. So a long time in coming, but everybody seems to be in agreement. Okay, James.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is I just got an email from the county about the order that Councilmember Blatz mentioned that's coming out tonight for tomorrow. And I wanted to point out a couple of things that I think are relevant and that people have asked us about. Looks like they are going to be allowing pet grooming, which has been a frequently asked question. Yeah, so that's one step. It does say hair and nail salons, gyms, and fitness studios are still prohibited, and playgrounds and picnic areas. So
we can trim the pet nails, but we can't get a haircut.
That's because you can drop them off. You can't drop your head off, Bill.
That's right.
You can buy a dog tag.
Bat nails.
Yeah.
Cats are excluded. Only dogs and cats.
Yeah, so we'll post that information too on our website and on our Facebook pages. But that's late breaking news. For next council meeting, we are planning to bring back, so we didn't talk about it much today because it's already been talked about. We're already planning to bring it back. We're going to bring back the cannabis tax ballot language, which we were trying to hold off until we could have a meeting where the public can come and participate. But unfortunately, there's also a deadline. So we're going to have to do it at this next meeting. Obviously, the public could still comment on it. But we'll have that, and we'll have the call for election on the agenda for the second meeting in May. And then just coronavirus and the 4th of July parade, and then a CIP budget review. So those will be the items scheduled for that May 26th meeting. And that's all I have.
Mayor,
Okay.
can we add things to the agenda?
Yeah. Well, as the council agrees, what is it?
I have two simple things. I'd like, James has sent out a summary on the ATP. And I'd like to, if we can, schedule that for a discussion. And then I think the more important one is the rate increase by Casitas. I think that as a council that we need to discuss it. There's as I read into it, and I'm not going to discuss it tonight, but I have some concerns with what they're doing and why they want to do it and how long they're going to do it for. So I'd like to have a discussion on the rate increase for Casitas.
Yeah, when is that hearing going to be held? Do you know the date? I don't have it in front of me.
June 24th, 3:00.
Okay, so yeah, okay, so we'll be timely. Good ad there. Okay, you got that, James?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, okay, then.
Wait, don't end yet.
Yeah, it's time to say goodnight.
No, wait. What about the rest of us for the future?
Oh, you want more agenda items?
Well,
I thought you
well,
didn't want to go back.
It's related. Couldn't we upgrade our technology so it's like the school board where, for example, if we're going to discuss the cannabis tax issue or whatever, that they could, the owners of the dispensaries could tune in? Or here's my other question. Are they allowed to come to City Hall and speak at the podium.
Yeah,
Just,
they are.
you know.
I believe they are.
Yeah, that's actually, I was just thinking that in the city attorney's on, we can get his opinion. But if offices are being opened up tomorrow, I'm kind of thinking that that means we'll be able to allow people back in for the next council meeting.
Certainly, that would be within, we'll have to confirm the kind of order that they just sent out tonight, but it would be within the scope of it. And further, I know, depending on the structure, some agencies are allowing people to join the Zoom and comment within this setting as well. So between that and allowing people to come to City Hall, that could definitely be arranged. And we may be required to, per another order from Newsom on Friday, for public hearings, as distinct from the rest of the public meetings, we have to allow applicants and appellants to participate live during the meeting.
So we'll plan to try to allow them here as long as we're able to do that. So.
Okay. So the city manager and the city attorney will work together to be sure we're in compliance with the laws and any of the governor's orders at the time. Okay.
I have one more request for the future from Matt. Can you give us, and James, can you give, people want an update on what's happening with 5G in Ojai? Can we find out? I think it's time for an update.
Yeah, we can do that.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
And that do we, is that just public information we want to put out, or do we want to have it back at a council meeting?
Well, I would like it. I don't know. I don't know.
You mean you just want to you want a public report given by the city manager, or just a summary of where we are, what's happening?
Yeah, the people want to know, is it coming in?
Okay.
Or what's
Okay,
the
so a status
for
report.
Ojai, and what can we do to protect ourselves as much as possible?
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
latter part's kind of problematic, is it
We
not?
have a robust ordinance now, but we can provide, I think we could start with a written public update and then go from there.
Okay, thank you.
Have there been any court cases changing our latitude?
Nope. There's
Okay.
been a number of cases filed, but I shouldn't be so glib. There have been a number of cases filed. None of them have resulted in a final non-appealable order in favor of the government giving us or any other government more power.
Okay,
There's been no rulings that help us yet,
thank you.
but there are a number of pending cases.
Okay, but we're talking about a status report, right? Just for information. We're not talking about a debate over something we have no further control at this time.
That's
Right,
why I
James?
think we start with a written report.
Yeah, start with the written report
Yeah.
and see where that brings us.
Okay, you have the written report to us on consent agenda, and the public will have access to it.
Yep.
That will solve the,
Because the 5-second summary that we could say is we restricted as much as we possibly could, but we'll provide a written status report of that.
Okay, thank you.
okay.
All
Okay,
right, John,
then,
I promise I'll be really quick though.
meeting,
Up.
Ryan, don't do it.
I gotta ask one question real quick. I know we don't know when restaurants are gonna open, but I want to make sure that if restaurants open between now and the next meeting or any meeting, that we get that on the agenda. Because we're gonna have to discuss it, I think, probably immediately. That's all. I don't think they're gonna open.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if they do, that's kind of a pending item.
Yeah, and we have the coronavirus response on each agenda, so we could fine tune that to that one.
I'll meet you in
Okay.
the outdoor patio to discuss it, Ryan.
Okay. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Right. Night, night.